by several of the speakers here, including the CS himself, to the extent that the debate around this process has been extremely chaotic. In fact, some of us who've been following on the outside, who are not in government nor in industry, we've tended to get confused. A lot of the key issues of policy that needed to come out to the fore have therefore not been able to be addressed adequately as they should. But also that, broadly speaking, the whole question of the coverage, the reportage around digital migration seeming and looking chaotic is perhaps, from an academic perspective, very emblematic of what one would refer to as a present moment. It's a moment of confusion. It's a moment that is characterized by quite a bit of flux, and mostly so because of the impact and the effect of new communication technologies on society and on the manner in which we do different kinds of things, including how the media themselves work. So what this has led to is a kind of anxiety. So in the debate between government on the one side and industry on the other, you tend to see anxieties emerging. On the part of industry, the question really, although they have not stated it very clearly, the question is an anxiety that relates to, so which is the best business model that would apply in a digital age? Although this process started way back in 2006, many people were thinking about it from the meeting that the minister alluded to, 2006 in Geneva, that set the ball rolling for digital TV transition. A lot of these questions, particularly so the complex question of which business model is therefore adequate or efficient in a digital age, this question has been very difficult, not just for industry players in Africa and in Kenya particularly, but also in Europe. There are people who've written about case studies of several industry players in pioneering countries in Europe that are still searching around for a more efficient business model that can serve them. So in Kenya also you see in that debate, but attendant to the question of a business model, you see the question of anxieties that develop as a result of the fact that, of course, obviously new players will come into the scene. So what is the nature of the competition that established traditional media companies in Kenya will be dealing with? What is the nature of that kind of competition? They haven't really put a finger to it. And so you would understand when they get jittery about some of these things. It also requires, whether you like it or not, a new set of data skills. I mean, skills, professional skills that are needed to operate efficiently in that kind of an environment. What does it mean for these traditional industry players? Those questions, although they have not touched on them in that specific manner, those questions really characterize and attend to the anxieties that we now are seeing on the part of industry players. Of course, there are others that relate to questions of legislation and all that, but those are mostly the anxieties now that come from the other side, the government side. What is the appropriate legislative or regulatory framework that they are going to use to referee this changing environment that is completely in so much flux? Because the digital era is not a static era. It's not a static situation where you're dealing with something that is very definite. Technologies are changing, the players are changing, the boundaries within which the defined players will be operating are also very fluid and changing. So what is the best legislative framework or regulatory framework that applies in those kinds of instances? So those questions are very heavy, and they cause quite a bit of anxiety on the part of these two antagonistic players. The only thing that I see is that as this debate then evolves in our context, there's a lack of trust. These players have not invested a bit more in terms of, the value of trust as an important cornerstone for policy making. How do we manage that? How can we think around that so that then we embrace trust as an important component of the policy making process, realizing and recognizing that the environment that we're dealing with is one in which no one is master. It is changing, it is uncertain, it is in flux, and that the technologies attendant to it are also shifting. So these questions are heavy, and therefore they require that government, players in the industry, but also other interest groups within society will all come together and work on a consistent basis, not one-off. Not 76 meetings like the CS was saying. You know, when the Digital Transition Committee, what he was calling the DTC, was put together, they had, of course, obviously several meetings, and he has put a number to those, up to about 76 of those. I think those are not enough to address the complexities that are attendant to this new age that we are talking about. We need more consultations, we need more informed debate around some of these issues. We need more committed processes of learning, consistent learning of the media landscape, of the media environment, and how it is shifting internally, locally here, but also the interplay with global forces out there. So we need that consistent investment in processes of learning that help to inform policy, that also help to inform practice. So from where I stand, to conclude, I see that, the complexity of the digital arena in our context will not, proceed very well without very significant collaboration between industry players, government institutions, including regulators, and other interest groups within society to even deal with questions like this question that has been talked about here quite often, the question of intellectual property rights in this changing dynamic landscape. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Grace. I think it will be interesting to read the result
of Kenya. Before we begin, allow me to request that don't have unnecessary interruptions. My very respected colleague, Dr. George Nyabuga, will moderate this session, and so I'll call him to take it up straight away.
And colleagues, it's always a pleasure to be in such a fora because I get to see friends, people that I haven't seen for a while, but also colleagues, people that we engage with every day. This is a session where we shall be dealing with digital economy and particularly on digital migration. And the full title is Digital Migration, Harnessing the Potential to Drive the Kenyan Economy in the 21st Century. But before I invite the speaker, Professor Bitange Ndemo, I want to make a few remarks, and especially remember 1989, because this was a time when the winds of change were sweeping through the world. And at that time, Professor now, Francis Fukuyama, wrote a book or a paper called The End of History. And The End of History has become a seminal piece of work, particularly because it marks the end of what, of course, Francis Fukuyama called an era where autocratic regimes were crumbling and liberal democracy, underpinned by capitalism, democracy, good governance, accountability, fiscal accountability and obviously political accountability were taking shape around the world. And in the foreword of the book, The End of History, Fukuyama writes, actually asks a few questions. And one of the questions that I thought is appropriate for this session is, where are we now in relation to that end of history, in terms of we moving from one era to another, in terms of migration, digital switchover to obviously start a broadcasting era that is informed by serious changes in the way we produce, share, consume media content. But in that sense, we're going to ask very serious questions today, particularly because we're looking at the potential to drive the Kenyan economy in the 21st century. And of course, we would not have had a more appropriate speaker than Professor Bitange Ndemo, who has been very passionate about digital migration, the switchover from analog to digital broadcasting particularly. But at the same time, we've started to see serious challenges, particularly because commercial media, commercial mainstream media, seem to some extent reluctant. The consequence of that, we're going to ask various questions, and I'm sure Professor Ndemo would answer or attempt to answer some of those questions on the relationship and the balance that sometimes that we need to strike between the logic of the market or market logic, and obviously the need to produce content that addresses serious issues of public interest. We're going to ask about creation of jobs, for example, within this environment, creation of content, development of human capital, especially, and ask, is society the people empowered? Are people ready, for example, for smart everything? Because now we have smart homes, smart gates, smart cooking, smart healthcare, transport, government, and things like those. Have people been empowered, business and consumers, to move along with the changes that we're experiencing now? If we, for example, couch that presentation in Fukuyama's thesis on the end of history, are people ready to move with the changes? Is mobility, for example, cloud computing, social networking relevant in Kenya, particularly because we see diffusion rates, internet diffusion rates, still being very low? How do we measure the digital economy, for example? Are we romanticizing about the digital migration? Is it worth it? How long will it really start to experience and to enjoy the real benefits of digital migration? And without further ado, I would like to welcome Professor Ndemo to come and speak to us.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. And I want to tell the organizers that I'm very grateful that you slotted me in the afternoon when most people have left, and those who have come in have just had a heavy lunch. So I have it to myself. First, I want to congratulate you on the celebration of the World Press Freedom Day, which is celebrated globally. I, at some point, worked with Mwangi to prepare this, but this year you are a bit too many. I don't know the incentives that you got to attend, but I'm delighted that we are beginning to recognize such dates, especially now with the new constitution, which guarantees a lot of rights that we want to ensure that the Kenyans have those rights. I'm here to talk about the digital economy and not the digital migration, because I think much of that was dealt with in the morning, and a bit of history, and then just tell you the thinking that was with the government. Then we were in the office. We were doing so many changes at the time, and some of the changes people did not know how they would impact their lives. For example, at the same time we were talking about digital migration, we were talking about how to migrate another migration which we call IP, Internet Protocol, which currently we use, which is version 4 to version 6. What that means in very simple language is that version 6, version 4, the numbering, everybody, the phone you have has an IP address, the computer you have has an IP address, and globally that was being depleted, and we wanted to migrate to a much larger version which would take care of the new technologies that were emerging. And partly the broadcast was also going to utilize a lot of this space. Now, when we began to talk about migration, I must say in retrospect that our communication was not good, but we were right on the mark in terms of what we wanted to explain to those commercial broadcasters and the citizens of this country. The point we were trying to communicate across is that the telecommunication technologies and the broadcast technologies had become one, and we call it a convergence of technologies. And because of that convergence, a lot needed to be changed, including the business models. When you talk about business models, those who have invested in the industry feel touched, and they want to be part of the process in the change. But change is always very, very, very difficult to explain, especially to those who had invested, because some had specific advantages which they did not want to lose. But in very simple language, it was that we had maxed out the use of the analog spectrum, and we wanted to allow a much broader participation in broadcast, meaning that we could have many, many, many people to come and broadcast. One of the ideas we had that we wanted every vernacular station, every vernacular to have their own station so that we can begin to disseminate information much more appropriately than we had done before. The ultimate migration was going to move from what it was, analog, to several phases before it came to what we refer to IP technologies. For example, the easier way is to say, ultimately what we want to get to is what you see of YouTube today, meaning that if you want to know what Ndemo is doing, or what news of Ndemo that have come out, you search that and you get that. And you are able to see. And the trouble is that most of us remained analog, such that our children, actually most of you, your children here, I want to see how many of you have seen your children watching TV news. One. You must be a Christian. Yeah? Yeah, these people migrated long time ago to YouTube. That is where they watch things. When most of you waited to watch Mayweather Pacquiao something, these people were in their bed with their mobile and watching highlights, only to wake up in the morning to tell you how the fight was. And your eyes are red for having stayed the whole night. The same thing happens with football. These people have understood the direction we are headed. And so it was actually very difficult for government at the time to bring together people from 3 centuries. You know, we have some of us in northern Kenya stealing cows. We have some of us still in the 20th century. We have our youth in the 21st century, and you're trying to bring them into the same platform. And that's the biggest problem, in the sense that people did not figure out what was going to happen. Where would the money come from? How would the money be made? So today, and those of you who look at the revenue sources for media houses, revenue has dropped, I think, between 30 and 40%. Why has revenue dropped? Because those who advertise in those media houses have known where the audience they want is. So when Caroline Mutoko takes 4 minutes of our time, you begin to see the new ones. The sponsors are Coca-Cola, because they know that is where they would get the future generation. And this is the place where we wanted to take media. But media refused. And I used to get frustrated because I could see what would happen. Initially, government invested in the platform and said, you can all come and use the platform. They said government would put us off. So we said, okay, fine, okay, you can get your own. But later on, I went back and said, I think the best thing you do is we give you the government one, you invest, you are the largest shareholder, and own it. The thinking was that the technology was going to change so fast that there is no private investor would recover their investment, because the model, the business model, is not like the mobile telephony. Because they at least have voice, they have broadband, they have other things to recover. And my thinking was, these people, they invest 4, 5 billion, and then in 2 years, 4, 5 billion, they will not recover this. But I didn't have the best way to explain that, because sometimes I have Kisii accent, and sometimes it's not quite understood. So I said, okay, let them do what they want to do in terms of investing in that technology. And what happened, which they didn't see, is that 6 months into what we used to call DVB-T, the technology moved to DVB-T 2, DVB-T 2. Within 6 months, that everything that we had put in place became obsolete, and we were moving. We tried to come and say, look at the mobile telephony. They had 2G. It's dead. People have moved to 3G. Even before some people pronounce 3G, 4G. Even before you test 4G, 5G. This is what is going to happen with the broadcast side, because the technologies have converged. That even if you had so much money to waste, you can't waste and cope with the technologies. And we tried, in fact, we had a meeting here, and we tried to explain that actually there will be rapid changes. Because if you look analog, you invested in the base stations, and it will take even 20 years. You can recover the investments, but you cannot recover in this high-paced change of technology. Whether you like it or not, technology will sweep you out unless you keep pace with that technology. Then we said, invest less, because the most appropriate investors in this sector will be the mobile providers. They said, oh, no, even after proving that these technologies are converging, we actually even went to pronounce and said, the biggest TV company is going to be Safaricom. They said no. But I'm happy to say today, everybody knows Safaricom is investing in TV. They have their base stations ready. They are not going to put new investment. The broadcasters, if they want to compete, they would have to put new investment. They don't have regular income like the operators. This is what we were worried about, because we wanted to create a huge sector in the media side, so that we begin to take advantage of the growing creative economy. In fact, those of you followed, we had already created a creative economy team to spearhead content development, because that is where the money was going to come from in terms of content. And to date, that is the area that we have not exploited. We have not exploited that area so that our youth can get jobs, the investors can make money. As we continue to have most of our